What's up developers, it's Dari here and welcome back to a new video where we're going to continue on with the 5th episode of our Filamentphp series, where we're going to have a look at resource modifiers and resource filters. If we navigate to the browser and click on new product, a couple things right here seems a bit off to me. Not design or functionality wise, but I personally think that resource modifiers are missing. Resource modifiers in Filamentphp or basically in any other admin panel are an important feature that allow developers to modify data in a resource before it is displayed. This is useful for a variety of tasks, such as formatting dates to make them more readable, hiding sensitive data, making fields required, or adding computed properties to a resource. Now keep in mind that Filamentphp offers tons of resource modifiers, and I know for a fact that I can't cover them all. I basically don't even know them all, but I do want to focus on a couple important ones. Let's navigate back to PhpStorm and let's get started right at the top with the name. Now our entire product relies on the name of the product, right? This is the field that should be displayed to the user, and definitely the field where a user decides whether he wants to buy the product or not. Now we can't have products with empty names, so we got to make sure that a name is required. And resource modifiers can be added on the form component, and the form component right here is this line of code. So basically the text input, : make with the name. Now to make the code more readable, I prefer to add my modifiers on the line below. So let's chain the required method to it. Once we navigate to the browser and refresh it, you will see that the required method has added right here an asterisk right after the label name, indicating that the field is required. If we try to click on create, you will see that we have been prompted with a message saying that the field cannot be empty. The second modifier that I want to cover is the live method. This method is used to enable or disable live validation for a form field. When live validation is enabled, the form field is validated as the user types, instead of waiting until the form is submitted. In case you want to re-render the form only after the user has finished using the field, you can use the unblur, where you need to set it equal to true. The unblur parameter determines whether the validation should occur when the field loses focus or as the user types. And true right here means that the validation will occur when the field loses focus. I made a typo right here because it should be unblur. Now I want to add one more resource modifier right here, which is the unique method, and I think that the name implies what it does. It basically tells the column that, well, the product name that the user tries to enter should be unique. Now the second component field that we have is the slug. And we do need to add a couple modifiers right here. We don't want to give the user the option to add the slug themselves, since the slug is in most cases based on the name of a product. So what we could do right here is chaining the disabled method, which will disable a form field so that the user cannot interact with it. The second method that I want to add right here is the dehydrated method. Dehydration is the process that gets data from the fields in your form and transforms it. The slug, just like the name, should be required as well, and the slug should be unique, because in general it is used as a part of the URL for the specific resource. And if there are duplicate slugs, it can create confusion and lead to errors when trying to access the resource. We're not going to keep the unique method empty, since we're going to add a couple arguments to it. The first argument is the class, which will be product : class. Then we need to define the column, which is slug. And on top of that, you can set the ignore record, where you need to set the value equal to true. This allows the current record to be ignored when checking for uniqueness. Now keep in mind that these arguments are optional, I just wanted to show them to you. Now if we navigate back to Google Chrome and refresh it, you will see that it has not added the value of the slug. This needs to be done inside the name field, since the slug will be generated based on the name. To do so, we need to navigate back to PhpStorm. Right after unique, we need to chain the afterStateUpdated method. which is a resource modifier that is used to modify the resource state after it has been updated. It takes a callback function as an argument, so let's say function parentheses curly braces. It accepts a string of operation, which represents the operation that triggered the state update. It accepts a state, which is an array containing the current state of a resource, and it has a forms \set object set, which is used to modify the resource state. Let me close off the sidebar for a moment, and in here we can basically do whatever we want. Let's say if the operation is not equal to create, and the operation is basically the type of request you're trying to perform, then outside of it, we're going to use our set object. Then we're going to say set parentheses. We're going to set the slug equal to the str facade. Now let's pull in the illuminate support slug, because we're going to create a slug based on the state. And the state in our case is the name. Let's navigate back to Google Chrome. Let's refresh it. Let's type in cloud hosting. Let's click on, well, any part of your app where you will see that the slug has been generated based on the name. Let's see what the next field is. We have defined the slug. We don't need to add anything for the description, but we do need to add a couple modifiers for the SKU. Now, for the people who have worked with e-commerces before, most likely know what SKU is. For the developers who haven't, SKU stands for stock keeping unit. It is a unique identifier for a product used in inventory management. It can be a combination of letters, numbers, or both, and is used to track a product's stock level and sales. Now, I personally think that it's good to give some kind of description to the SKU. Now, what Filament allows us to do is basically chaining the label method to it, which will replace the actual label. And you might have already noticed the label right here is generated based on the column name, but you can adjust it through the label method that we have defined right here. So let's pass in a string of SKU parentheses, and inside the parentheses, we're going to add stock keeping unit. Once we navigate to the browser and refresh it, you will see that we have replaced the label to SKU stock keeping unit. Now, next to the label, we're going to say that our SKU should be unique and it should be required. Now, then we have the price. And this is pretty cool because we need to change our text input to a numeric value. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you will see that it has added the caret up and down, and it basically has made it a number input field. Then I want to add a pretty cool method right here, which is the rules method. Now let's say that you want to define custom validation rules for a form field. In Filament, you can chain the rules method. Keep in mind that under the hood, Filamentphp uses Laravel's validation. This means that you can use any Laravel validation form rule with Filamentphp's rule method. This method takes an array of validation rules as its argument, where these validation rules can be used to validate the data entered by the user in the form field. So let's say that we're going to add a custom regex colon. I'm not going to write it out, but simply copy paste it, and I'll add it in the description down below so you can copy paste it as well. And finally, we need to chain the required method to it. Now, the next field is the quantity field. Now, this field should be numeric as well, but instead of saying numeric, we can use the rules method and say that this field should be an integer and it has a minimum value of 0. And this is just to showcase you the power of the rules method. But let's get rid of it. I want to make it a numeric value. And then I want to chain the min value to it, which will basically do the same. So let's say 0. And keep in mind that the same can be done for the maximum value. So let's chain max value of, let's say, 100. And let's chain the required method to it. Now for the types, we're simply going to pass in the required method because I don't want to do anything special right here. Now let's move on to the next section, which is the status. We're going to add 3 modifiers for our isVisible. The first one is the label, which is used to set the label of the form again. So let's say visibility. Then we're going to chain the helperText method, which is used to set a helperText for a form field. And in our case, we're going to pass in a string of enable or disable product visibility. Whoops, I made a typo. All right. Finally, I want to chain the default method to it, which is used to set the default value of the form field. And in our case, we're going to pass in a default value of true. And there's no need to pass in a default value of false because that's the default behavior. So let's navigate back to Google Chrome and let's see how this looks. You will see that we have added a string of enable or disable product visibility and it has been enabled by default. Now let's add a couple modifiers for the is featured as well. Well, let's say the label is featured. The helperText is enable or disable products visibility of enable or disable products featured status. All right, we're getting quite far. The final field that I'm going to cover is the published_at. I'm going to chain the label method to it again because I want a different label. It needs to say availability. I'm going to chain a default method to it where I'm going to use the now method inside of it. And the now method is a PHP function that returns the current date and time in the default time zone set on the server where PHP code is running. Now finally, we have the image right here. And there are tons of modifiers you can add right here, so I will link the documentation down below, but I want to cover 4 important ones. The first one is the directory method, which is used to set the directory where uploaded files should be stored. So let's say form-attachments. The second method is the preserveFileNames method, which is used to preserve the original file names of uploaded files. By default, Filamentphp renames uploaded files to prevent file name collisions. Then I'm going to chain the image method to it, which is used to indicate that the uploaded file is an image. This basically allows Filamentphp to perform additional validation, such as checking the file's dimensions and MIME type. Finally, we have the coolest method, in my opinion, which is the imageEditor method, which is used to enable the image editor for the uploaded image. This allows users to crop, resize, rotate, and so on. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, and let's actually click on products. Let's upload an image. And right here, you will see an edit icon. Let's click on it. And right here, you will see a pretty cool panel opening up where we can do a lot of configurations to our image. But for now, I'm just going to close it off. Now, these were the modifiers I wanted to cover related to the forms. Filament supports a couple additional modifiers for the table object right here. The first method that I want to cover needs to be added on the name column. So let's chain the searchable method to it. And the searchable method is a table modifier that allows users to search for data within a table column. When this method is applied to a column, it creates a search box on the table overview. Let's refresh it right here. That allows users to search for data within that column. So if we say VPS, you will see that it has created an active filter where it searched for VPS and it has found one row. The second method that I want to chain is the sortable method. The sortable method is a table modifier that allows users to sort data within the table column. When this method is applied to a column, it creates a sort icon on the table overview that allows users to sort the data within that column. And you can see the icon right here. Well, let's move on to the next column, which is the brand name. And right here, I'm simply going to chain the searchable method and the sortable method. But on top of these two, I'm going to add the toggleable method as well. The toggleable method is a table modifier that allows users to toggle values within a table column. When this method is applied to a column, it creates a toggle switch on the table overview, so let's refresh it, right here, that allows users to quickly enable and disable columns on the table. So if we click on brand, you will see that the brand has been removed from the table overview, which is pretty cool in my opinion, but I do want to show it. Now you can add it for multiple rows, so let's do it for the visibility as well. So we have, let's say, sortable, we have toggleable, and I also want to change the label to visibility. Once we navigate back to Google Chrome and refresh it, click on our filters, enable the column, you will see that we have added the visibility again. Now let's navigate back and let's add both the toggleable and the sortable method on the price as well. And let's do the same thing for the quantity. Alright. Now there are different methods on how you can display a date time. And the one that Filament supports out of the box is pretty fine, right? It outputs the date. But it even offers another option. Once we navigate back and on our published add column, change the date method. And let's actually also add the sortable method. Navigate back to Google Chrome and refresh it. You will see that it has formatted the date in a human readable time. You will see that it has formatted the date to a human readable date. Alright, now the final topic that I want to cover are resource filters. Resource filters are used in a table which allows users to filter the data in a table based on specific criteria. It's completely up to you on what type of filter you want to create. But one example might be where users could filter the table to show only products with a certain price range or products that are currently in stock. Currently, we only have one row, so it does not really make sense to use filters. But resource filters are useful with huge amount of data because they allow users to quickly find the information they need without having to manually search through the table. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and right here you will see that our table object has a filters method chained to it. Just like columns and field types, Filament supports tons of different filter types, which I can't cover all. So I just want to create two simple filters, where the first one will be a ternary filter. A ternary filter is a resource filter in Filamentphp that allows users to filter data based on three possible values. In most cases, this will be true, false, or blank. An example might be products that are visible. So let's say is visible. We're going to chain the label method to it with the label of visibility. Then we're going to chain the Boolean method to it, followed with the true label, which will be only visible products. And on the line below, we're going to define a false label as well, which will be only hidden products. And we're going to chain the native, which is basically the default, which is false. I made a typo right here, excuse me. All right, let's navigate back to the browser and refresh it. And right next to our input field, you will see that it has added a filter. Once we click on it, you will see the label that we have added of visibility. Once we click on the drop down, we can say, well, only show visible products. The final filter that I want to make is a SelectFilter, which is a resource filter in Filamentphp that allows users to filter data based on a select box of options. And this is useful for filtering data based on categorical data, such as product types or categories. For us, we can use the relationship that we have defined based on the brands. So let's pass in a brand right here. And let's on the line below change the relationship method. But we need to define the relationship that we have, which is the name of brand, followed with the column that we want to show, which is name. Once we navigate back to the browser and refresh it, you will see that we have created a new filter where we can choose between brands. We currently have one, so if we click on it, you will see that it filters based on the brand. For now, I want to wrap up this video where we have covered tons of columns and form modifiers and we have created 2 custom filters on our table overview. Now this was it for today's video. If you do enjoy my content and you want to see more, give this video a thumbs up, and if you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.